If Kentmere 100 is made by Ilford, is it anything like Ilford film? I wanted to do some more film comparisons to Tri-X like I began earlier in the year. But to keep things consistent, rather than do them every now and then, I went ahead and got 49 different film stocks, everything I could get in 35mm from B&H and Freestyle. So unless they were out of stock, I got a roll of it. Now, if this part of the video seems familiar, it's because I'm using this portion of the video for all 49 of them rather than record it 49 times. So if you want to skip ahead to the H&D curves or the prints, time codes are right over here. For those of you that haven't seen this part of the video before, here's what I've done. So I wanted to use each film with the exact same shot, which is a headshot of me with a Kodak Gray Card Plus, which happens to have a red, blue, and green patch, a cyan, magenta, yellow patch, and then a dark and a neutral flesh tone. Then, with those shots taken, I bracketed every shot in third of a stop so that we can make sure we have a negative of equal shadow density to the base target film of Tri-X. Now, the reason I use Tri-X is because it's just been around for a long time and it's a very popular film. So it's a good base film to compare everything to. Then, once everything was developed, which was developed in D-76 at stock for the manufacturer's recommended time, I printed everything on Ilford using the exact same aperture, contrast settings, developer, and everything. The only thing I changed was my exposure time, and that was to make sure that I compensated for any base fog variation from one film stock to another. Other than that, everything was left the same so that we can have a comparison of just the qualities of the film. Now, there's going to be some differences in contrast, especially on the high end, and that's because the manufacturers getting their development time may not have used the same target that Kodak used for Tri-X. And that's okay. We're not looking at the overall contrast for everything. What we're really looking at is grain characteristics, tonality, how the film treats the shadows versus the highlights, that sort of thing. And we're looking at spectral sensitivity, thus the Gray Card Plus, rather than just a regular Gray Card. So we're going to go ahead and look at H&D curves, which if you saw one of my earlier videos on sensitometry, I like to use pen and paper and make my graphs. However, my wife was really ready to make sure I was done with this project. So she put everything into a spreadsheet for you all. So even though I don't like them, I want to show them to you thanks to her. Then we're going to go ahead and look at the prints side by side with the same print made from Tri-X. And from there, you can decide if you like the film and if you want to go and use it. So let's go ahead and take a look at the curves, and then we'll go to the prints. Once again, with Tri-X in the blue, we have Kentmere 100 in red. This is almost only a straight line portion of our line. Then we have a fantastic toe, where the shadows should begin separating almost immediately in the low values. We then have a nice good straight line, a little bit of a dip in the midtones, but not much. And then going smoothly up into our highlights with virtually no shoulder, or no shoulder to speak of at all. That means we should get, at least on paper, a very well separated tonal scale on this film. So let's go ahead, look at the prints, and see if we get that fantastic shadow separation that the graph shows, or if that is just misleading. Here we have our Kentmere 100 print and our Tri-X 400 print. The Kentmere is exposed at 100, so we are getting full emulsion speed from it. That's fantastic. If we look at our color chart, we can see we are getting a full panchromatic response, just like the Tri-X. So already we're starting out pretty much comparable side by side. The overall density of the film came out about the same for our highlights, so that's good. This does look a little bit brighter on this side, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. But the overall prints look pretty close. Yes, there's some differences in the high end, and we're going to talk about that when we look a little bit closer, which let's go ahead and do. Since there's not really much difference here in the base, let's look a little closer at the details. All right, here we are on the first section. We can see that we are getting fairly fine grain, though I would have to say at a 100 speed, we're not as dramatically different than the Tri-X at a 400 speed. We saw the Kentmere 400 had enormous grain compared to Tri-X. And so here we're seeing the 100 speed at about the same size grain as Tri-X. And that's just, it's different. It is a less expensive film. So if you can handle a 2-speed difference, this may be a great option to give you a similar grain size. But quite frankly, at most moderate enlargements, you're probably not going to see much of a difference anyway. All right, let's look at the next section. All right, here on the shaded shoulder, we can see that we are still getting nice fine detail in the fabric, the silhouetted fabric against the background. The background is showing the texture of the grain fairly well. We're having good gradation from the black shadows to the midtones. So overall, pretty good performance here. Okay, here on the lighted side of the shot, we're getting good detail in the ribbing of the collar. We're seeing the stitching down the shoulders pretty clear and crisp. Good detail. It's not being obscured by any grain. It is a sharp film as opposed to others that we have seen or will see, depending on what order I release these in. It's not a soft film in terms of sharpness. So good detail, good texture in the fabric and skin. Good performance here. So let's move on to the face. All right, here we are on the face. The camera seems to have a little bit of a soft focus here. It missed the focus a little bit. We did see with the collar just a moment ago, it is nice and sharp. Here, not as much. So clearly the camera misfocused and it's not a softness in the film. I feel like the ear right here, that is fairly sharp. So it just missed my eyes a little bit. That's not the film's fault. That's just the camera. Other than that, we have good tonality, we have good detail, but what we do have, and this is why I think the overall print appeared maybe a touch lighter than the Tri-X, is the rendering of tones. So if you look at the highlight in the forehead right here, it is about the same as the Tri-X, but it's how it falls off from here to the other tones on either side. They are almost identical with the Kentmere, whereas there's greater separation in the Tri-X. We can see the same thing here along the bridge of the nose. The tones on either side of the highlight aren't much different than the highlight itself, whereas the Kodak, it is. It's much more dramatic. So our Kentmere, it doesn't separate the highlights much, which means it's just going to render these a little bit different, and it makes the photograph, I think, appear a little lighter than it really is in the skin tones, because they're all close to the same tone, and the Kentmere is just rendering them almost identical. So we're getting very, very flat performance, and because that performance is flat in the highlights, it makes more areas seem light than the Tri-X, which has greater separation, so there are more dark and light areas for the same skin, same parts of my skin under the same light. So a little bit different treatment of the film and how it renders these tones. Just something to be aware of. There's nothing wrong with this film at all. You're just going to get slightly different performance in those particular features. All right, that's it for this particular film. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to help support this channel, you can go to my Patreon page or my merchandise page, linked down in the bottom. Your support goes to making more videos like this. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.